Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really awesome guest on today. She became a partner at the New York office of Pentagram, the distinguished international design consultancy, in 2002. There, her team specialized in digital information projects, including the design of large-scale media installations, software prototypes and user interfaces, signage, and websites for a broad range of civic, cultural, and corporate clients. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Strausfeld. Welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. It's great to be here.
Ready for 20 questions?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Great. Question one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
I am a designer. I always struggle with the answer to this question. I I usually sort of default to saying I'm a designer. I think it's more accurate to say I'm a digital designer. I designed for digital displays. I design with digital content, data, information, and my focus for decades now has been on new forms of interactive information experiences. Um, your introduction mentioned Pentagram, so I was there for 10 years as a partner, and then I've had some other chapters, including building and leading a data visualization group at Bloomberg, a lot of work with Gallup, and my own studio, Information Art. Currently, I've been leading design at an AI startup called System. And System is building a kind of massive systems graph of how anything in the world relates to everything else. And I think of it as like a sort of Google Earth of scientific research. And I also still work out of my studio, Information Art.
Great. And just a note for the audience, if you guys want to check out one of our early big supporters, definitely check out the episode with John Maeda, one of my favorite ones. So question two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Well, I share this thing that makes me different with someone else you've interviewed, Ellen Lupton. I, like Ellen, am an identical twin.
Mm.
And I it's it's been interesting just looking at these questions, how I think you'll hear some of the issues from these origins will come up later. Definitely, there's been a lot of focus for me on identity. I am very anti-dichotomy. I think with identical twins, there's a tendency to create these like binary labels that are mutually exclusive. Like my sister Laura was always known as kind of the verbal one, and I was the visual twin, and these kind of labels of A and not A. These binary labels definitely are the kind of downside of being an identical twin. And but there's so many upsides, and of course I'm very close to my sister, and we talk every day, and that is something that makes me different.
Perfect. Question three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Uh, well, this is a good segue to John Maeda, actually, because we were both at the Media Lab at MIT. So I studied architecture. Undergrad, my major was art history. I had a kind of minor in computer science, and I always planned to be an architect. My mother was an urban planner and always wanted to be an architect, and I, from a young age, talked about being an architect, and I became an architect. I went to architecture school, and I am not an architect now. I took a bunch of left turns. I graduated from architecture school in the middle of the recession of the early 90s. So it was hard to get paying work, fulfilling work, work that didn't come with a lot of problems that I find in the field of architecture that existed then. I hope they don't exist as much now, but sexism, various forms of harassment, and probably more significantly like a kind of technologically regressive or backwards looking focus. Uh, anyway, a bunch of those things inspired me to shift. I was told that Motorola was hiring architects to design layout, to do layout for memory chips. I was living in Austin, Texas. So I shifted there and started writing scripts, kind of leveraging my coding background, which I had been dormant for a bunch of years. I started writing scripts to automate the layouts, and then I heard about the Media Lab at MIT and applied and joined the Visible Language Workshop, which was under the direction of graphic designer Muriel Cooper. Again, my background was in architecture. I'd never done any work in graphic design, never had thought about working with information, and just pivoted there. It kind of helped that the early work, well, actually, just as I joined the Media Lab in 1993, um, there was a shipment of Silicon Graphics workstations. So the early work that I did was in 3D. So that was a good transition from architecture into graphic design, certainly was to design in 3D. And this is the question of how did I get here? Um, and then basically I've been doing that form of design and designing for information for the last 30 years. It really has been 30 years. I can't believe it.
Great. Some people struggle with number four, but the question is, what does your future look like?
Mhm. For some reason, as I thought about this, I thought about the past. Maybe it was a segue from the previous conversation or the previous question. Uh, I this eclipse is coming up on April 8th, which will be visible in the US. And I have a very vivid memory of an eclipse in 1994 in May. I was at the Media Lab. I remember what I was wearing. I remember who I was with. We were outside. I feel like there's definitely some kind of full circle moment here, a pivot. That was a big pivot in my life to kind of a new focus, a new form of work 30 years ago. I feel like I'm at a similar juncture now. I
Mhm.
don't really know where it will lead me exactly, but I have this like feeling that change is coming and I'm really open to it. So what my future looks like, I think it will be there's some desire to kind of like write and about what I have learned and what I know, some teaching. I've been thinking a lot about Muriel Cooper, one of my mentors, and Red Burns, who was directed this amazing program at NYU, the ITP, Interactive Telecommunications Program at NYU, until she was in her late 80s. Both of them are really present for me and had a huge influence on me, and I'm channeling them right now. I also, one last thing for my future, I really would like it to be a little bit more tactile. Um, um, I I have this need to make things with my hands at this moment.
Great. Five we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Mhm. Uh, Location. Well, I've been bi-coastal for a couple decades as well. Uh, and right now I'm living in Portland, Oregon. We moved here from Brooklyn, New York, about a year and a half ago, but my family has been back and forth for about 20 years. My husband is from here, and I'm from the East Coast, and we've had homes on both coasts. I think for me, the West is important. For some reason, it's for me like a place of reflection and thought, probably a little bit more silence. I I like looking west to think somehow. And the East Coast for me is more about action and networking and a kind of delightful frenzy, but I have needs, constant needs over the years to escape that. So right now, this is where I am, and it feels pretty good. I should say one last thing about Portland. For a long time, for me, it was just not New York, like kind of an escape from New York. But Portland has definitely, it's not the best moment for Portland as a city, but for me, it's definitely been growing on me, and I'm really enjoying living in Portland at the moment.
Great. So if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Uh, it's this one was interesting. It's almost like I don't think I could have done things differently. I sometimes I wish I could have, but I just I don't know how any advice would have changed the course of anything that happened in my life. Somehow, I do, and this will come up again, I think, but my advice would be, and this comes from Brad Clopeville, my favorite architect, who is also my partner. But my advice would be true to what you know, and the operative word being know or knowing rather than just thinking or believing.
Great. 7, what's a day in your life like?
I have been working with System, which is based in New York. So I'm one of those, I'm sure a lot of us are like this, sort of Pacific time people working on East Coast time.
Mm.
I there's in the morning, there's coffee and school lunch making, and then there's school drop off. And then I've been working there's I have another colleague from System who happens to be living in Portland. So there's a daily stand up with the team at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and various meetings and Slack huddles and lots of I feel like I live inside of Figma and Notion and uh, lots of that remote working. I do get to do some school pickup because it happens after meetings on the East Coast are finished. Um, and then there's a lot of like soccer shuttling, which is starting to change now that my daughter is driving. So I will fill that time with a bit more of my own needs, like swimming and other things that I haven't had time to do. Oh, and then there's, family dinner, homework, Netflix, that kind of thing.
Nice. 8 is around lifelong learning. It's a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Uh, I I think it's just sort of built into what I do. I wrote this blog piece for System Designing for the Edge, which is really about, literally like a network or system graph, nodes and edges. The edges are the kind of links between topics or variables in our case. But I would say that I also have always kind of designed at the edge. I like to be kind of at the front or the lead or the sort of pioneering edge of tech. It's funny because I don't think I've like sought it out. I just find myself there. So really in my day-to-day work, I feel like I'm staying up to date just by constantly learning from my amazing colleagues who really are at the forefront of AI and machine learning um, and so other than that, it's just the usual, you know, surfing and just all of the media sources I think that all of us are kind of engaged in every day.
Great. Nine is tools. Do you use digital and analog tools?
Uh, I I do continue to use sketchbooks, but I I mean Figma has been life-changing for me to collaborate with designers and actually not just designers, but writers and clients. And I even have found that when I'm working one-on-one with a designer in person, we're both looking at our own screens and working in Figma. So Figma Notion, I think, is a really amazing tool. I'm very into any kind of like object-oriented structures and thinking, and I feel like Notion could become the only tool. It could become a sort of, I don't know. I'm really fascinated by Notion and what's possible with Notion.
Great. Number 10 is work-life balance, life-work balance. How do you deal with it?
That is another dichotomy that again, this is coming from the sort of twin origins that I wouldn't say I reject, but I don't really relate to. Uh, I I don't mind them sort of blurring together, I would say. In fact, my ideal situation would be that they complement, they or not complement, they inform, they complement, um they're one and the same. I don't know. They're yeah, there there are no boundaries, and that's okay.
Hmm. Okay, and number 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
Well, I really do like making things. I think that's where I'm happiest. In if we were living in like more primitive times, I probably would be doing those kind of stereotypical female crafts like basket making and ceramics, maybe a little later, quilting, knitting, um, probably anything but hunting and gathering. I yeah, I love any kind of craft work. I do a lot of sewing right now. I was doing a lot of crocheting during the pandemic, and it kind of keeps my mind and hands busy.
Great. And 12, what would you not like to do with your career?
Uh, I I actually would like to not design within an agile process. I I definitely respect the process. I think it makes a lot of sense for large sort of software development projects. I have yet to find it really support a creative design process. I would love like to find examples of success with Agile for design, but I have yet to find it, and I find it to be a bit of a struggle. And then maybe related, uh, someone I worked with years ago said that I was very kind of big picture and detail oriented, but less sort of whatever the middle scale of that is. And I think that's probably true. I do prefer big picture and detail and less of the everything that happens in between.
How about a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Uh, Again, I think I would probably go back to the one I mentioned before about just being, this came from Brad Cliffel, be true to what you know. I also love the word grace. And actually I had one more because I've been wanting to use this in an essay of some kind, but this is a good opportunity. There, in the book Delirious New York by Rem Koolhaas, he has a chapter on Raymond Hood, who was the architect who designed Rockefeller Center. And he starts that chapter with the following. I'm actually looking at this. It says, architecture is the business of manufacturing adequate shelter for human activities. And then my favorite form is the sphere. I assume these are quotes by Raymond Hood. And then he follows it with this quote: the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposite ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Nice. How about a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Um, I my first thought here was no, maybe, and then I was thinking something like yes or no, or any of these kind of like binary either or labels.
You're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
This one was hard too. The best I could do here was gray, meaning like neither black nor white. I also was thinking of something like searching, but that's not so great. I also really, uh, there's something about ambiguity that one of the phrases I've loved for a long time since I was studying architecture is clear ambiguity.
Hmm. What keeps you up at night?
I think I've listened to a bunch of these interviews, and I share, I think, what everyone else has said pretty much, just our uncertain future, concerns about the planet, democracy. And then there's always the like, shit, I forgot to send this email or um, respond to this, or those things keep me up at night. I also do, I think um, the nighttime has always been my favorite time since I've had a child. I I don't really get to enjoy it as much as I used to, but I think my best work has always happened at night, but it'll be nice to get back to that at some point.
17, a dream you're chasing?
Um, this one was hard too. I think for myself, it's getting back to what I know. I think it's really hard to stay there. I think I really stayed in isolation after the pandemic ended, and maybe it was just a sort of phase that I needed for a while. Um, but just getting back to really knowing for myself. I think for others, I've always been interested in like understanding, enabling understanding. My thesis at MIT was that was in the title about enabling understanding with the work. Uh, I also one other thought here. I have this memory of being at the Media Lab with Muriel Cooper at my side as I was flying through one of the projects I was working on, which was like a grid of numbers, and Muriel just like wanted to be in that space. I think she wanted to fly and be in these sort of disembodied abstract spaces of information. That's still a dream that I'm chasing. I think it's and I've done some work related to that in recent years. This thing that I called the Cooper engine, which was kind of VR experience in 3D. I still think it's possible to create these experiences that enable our understanding of really abstract and complex information, and with kind of a new way of really understanding, seeing, embodying that content. So that is still a dream I'm chasing. And then the last thing I will say here is expression, some form of expression.
Great, last few here. What inspires you?
I had a couple sort of themes here. One is I'm still inspired by great art and great design. There is a lot of design around us. A lot of it is really good, but more of it could be great. And I'm very interested in thinking about like what it is that makes work great. One thought is that it's like it's work that is supported, inspired by an idea, like usually a single idea. I think that's really important because I think design work that has an idea, it sounds really simple, but it's actually pretty hard to do. But if it has one idea, it kind of engages in a larger dialogue, with other work, with culture, with other designers, with work throughout time. And again, I think that's really important, because it in turn inspires all of us who, are around this work and experience it. And then the other theme is I'm definitely inspired by larger things. I'm inspired by this eclipse on Monday. uh, and there was an eclipse here in 2017. There was one I still remember in 1994. I'm still inspired by, yeah, the universe.
Great. And 19, any advice you'd like to share?
Again, I'm being really repetitive, but the main bit of advice is be true to what you know. I think we all, I think a lot of creative work is about sort of getting to the source. I think I'm borrowing, I love that word. I think Rick Rubin in his amazing book, The Creative Act, talks about the source as this kind of collective thing. But um, I also think of the creative act as really about finding, more than inventing, like discovering, finding, unearthing. Again, being true to what you know. And then the other piece of this is just being open and kind to yourself first, and then, of course, to others.
Great. And finally, number 20, how do we keep tabs on you? What's our call to action?
I still to work out of my little studio, informationart.com. And I, like I said, I intend to be writing more and expressing more in some forms that have yet to be really understood and determined, but I'm excited about that. And probably I would use LinkedIn for those first uh, bits of news about what's happening.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's such a privilege. Thanks for this.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And thank you for putting up all of these amazing interviews that you've done so far.
Great. Thanks.